I grow up, I'm going to be a selfish pig.
When I grow up, I'm going to cheat my way through college.
When I grow up, I'm going to run in a race and I'm not going to finish it.
I want to inherit all my dad's money and squander it all on wine and women.
When I grow up, I want to commit treason.
When I grow up, I want to gamble all my money away.
When I grow up, I want to work for FEMA and completely screw up a natural disaster.
When I grow up, I want to have kids and completely miss out on raising them.
I'm going to drop out of school.
I want to be involved in a corporate scandal.
When I grow up, I want to be a hobo.
I want to receive a dishonorable discharge.
When I grow up, I want to take steroids and break the home run record.
When I grow up, I'm going to marry the wrong person.
So what do you want to do when you grow up? Now, I wonder, though, and I ask this, how many of you, when you were a kid, when someone said, what do you want to do when you grow up, you said, I want to go to prison. How many of you said that? See, I didn't think too many people would raise their hands for that. None of us know exactly the plan that is out there before us, but we hope that we make plans that don't take us down the road of being a hobo or something like that. The idea is that we want to come together and look at Proverbs again, and talk about what it means to be wise. And we all choose the plans for our life, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But Solomon gives us all of this wisdom to help guide those choices. So if you brought a Bible or a device, you can go to Southland Guest and get on a Bible app, and you can plug into the Bible as we unpack it today. We're going to talk a little bit more about what Solomon said about being wise. Now, just to give you a little background, always want to remind you every week, here's King Solomon. God said, whatever you want, I'm going to give you, and he asked for a discerning heart or wisdom to know how to govern his people. God gave him that as well as wealth and honor, and so he wrote Proverbs to really instruct his family, instruct his nation on what it meant to live in the wisdom of God. And in the midst of all of that, he teaches us how to be what I call street smart. It means to know the difference between fake and true, good and bad, right and wrong, and to know what to do with what you know. And that's what the whole book is about. And our goal is to learn a little bit from what he taught and apply that to our lives today. It's very relevant to our lives. And there's one key verse in it right at the beginning that he lays out for us so we understand the whole book. And it says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And so we're drawing the contrast between what it means to be foolish and what it means to be wise in our lives. And I think God has a lot of advice for us through this book called Proverbs. Now, previously, that's what they say when they're trying to catch you up, on like a TV show you've been watching. Previously on Wise. We were talking about what wisdom is. We're talking about how discipline is the best way to get wisdom, and then ultimately how to apply that wisdom to our relationships. Today, then, we want to talk about how all of that works together in impacting the plans that we make. And so I want to start with Proverbs 16, 1 through 3. And in starting that, I want you to understand that in your life, in my life, we basically have three sets of plans. The first one are the plans I make for myself. The second are the plans others have for me. And the third are the plans God has for me. And we really want to dial in on those three ideas. So here's what Proverbs 16 says. We can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer. People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. Commit your actions to the Lord, and your plans will succeed. Now, we're going to use that as a foundation for us as we plow through this idea of these three sets of plans. First of all, I want to talk about that. What about those plans that I have for myself? I have my plans for my life. Now, what do you want to do when you grow up? Now, some of you are saying, really? I'm already doing it, Steve. Well, the whole point is we all continue to make plans. Some plans are short-term, like what am I going to eat for breakfast today? And other plans are more long-term. What am I planning to do with whatever time that I have, whatever wealth I accumulate, whatever relationships I develop in my life? What are my plans for all of those resources? Now, here's the question. I want you to get this. What is the foundation of your planning? In other words, what are you trying to accomplish with your plans? I mean, is it really just about, I want to do what I want to do? Or should there be more to your plans than just doing what you want? Solomon said it here, we make our own plans. There it is. That's the whole thing that we believe, that there's freedom of choice. God gives you the opportunity to look at this world and decide, what do I want to make of it for my life? What do I want this world to be for me? Now, of course, most people go out there and make plans according to what they believe will make them happy or fulfilled. This is how I'm going to be content. This is what I like to do. This is what I want for my life. But what actually does bring the most fulfillment? I mean, what really would give you the most satisfaction or peace in your life? In your planning, do you only ask, what do I like to do? Or is there something greater that you're trying to accomplish with your plans? Now, Solomon said it this way, people may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. See, what is motivating both your short-term and your long-term plans? What is motivating your schedule and the things that you do? What priorities are you using to develop these plans? Solomon tells us to recognize we are motivated by something or someone, and that is what drives the decision we make about my plans, your plans, our plans. But is that all that my life is to accomplish, is to just provide basic necessities for my life? Am I here just to survive? Is that really all it is? So I go out and make plans so I have food to eat and a house over my head and clothes to wear and a few relations. Is that all there is to it? Or should there be more to my planning? Well, I know you're saying to yourself, are you ever going to tell us anything? Or are you going to spend the whole sermon just asking us a boatload of questions? Yes. I'm going to ask you a boatload of questions because I want to know what it is you're trying to do with your plans. Here's why. Sometimes your plans get interrupted. Sometimes challenges are put between you and what you thought you were planning for the rest of your life. Let me give you an example. Just this week, Stephanie and I got a text from a good friend of ours. And here's what she said. Her husband had been going through a little issue at his employment. And so she starts out talking about that. Along with what we're facing with my husband's work, here's what happened yesterday. All of this in one day. $3,000 to $5,000 to fix my husband's tooth. A coworker's brother was in an accident and is unresponsive. My friend's cousin committed suicide in jail. My mother-in-law was scammed out of $6,500. Our worship leader announced that he was leaving in November. And I got a call from the dermatologist that my son has basal cell carcinoma, a non-life-threatening skin cancer on his head, and needs surgery ASAP. Now, that was all in one day. That can mess up your plans. But here's what she said. There is just no way, all in caps, by the way, you know how texting is. There is no way I can handle all of this, but Jesus can. And then she quotes Proverbs. And she says this, she is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. So last night, I was sharing some of this with my dad, and I did start laughing. It's all too much for me, but not for him. I'm exhausted, and I have a headache this morning, no kidding, with a full day of visits ahead of me. So trying to put on my strength and dignity outfit, and might even need to put on my tiara. Our Father, the King, is going to take care of things. Now, see, this is what a person who understands, I make plans, I have stuff that we want to do with not only my time, my talents, my resources, but sometimes interruptions happen. Challenges happen. So here's the question, When that happens, what's the foundation of your plan? When my plans are interrupted, what is my character built on that will deal with those challenges? So see, Solomon makes it clear. I have the freedom to make my own plans, and those plans should be built on something or someone. So with that in mind, we'll set that over here, keep that there, and let's consider the second thing that he says. Look at Proverbs 12:5. He says this, "The plans of the godly are just, but the advice of the wicked is treacherous." So now I have my plans for myself, then I have others' plans for my life. And maybe it was your parents or your teachers or your coworkers or your employer or your friends, but all of us are influenced in our planning by others. And this influence can be both bad and it can be good. Solomon describes both throughout Proverbs. Do you realize what a big a big influence is on your planning? Advertising. It's the influence others have when you don't even know they're having it. And all of those things impact what we desire and what we focus on and what we plan for. Remember the adulteress and seductress that Solomon uses in Proverbs. That was the image of the person who's pulling me away from my passionate pursuit of the knowledge of God. And here's what he says about them. He says it right in the verse we just read. The advice of the wicked is treacherous. Now look, a lot of people in your life you would never consider for a minute are wicked. You know, we use that word, it sounds so awful. But the fact is, anyone who is pulling us away from our first love, is driving us towards some other plan than what we should be pursuing for God, is being used for wicked purposes. Even if they're wonderful people. We all have people in our lives who try to influence our plans, whether in the short term with peer pressure, or whether in the long term, whether that's society or our culture. Now, here's an interesting thing. In Proverbs 7, Solomon warns about the voices of those who want to lead you down a path of destruction, a path of failure away from God. And he ultimately gets to this seductress in Proverbs 7:21. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. The idea that maybe others' plans are better than the plans you know to be best for you. The reality is we all have people in our lives that try to influence our plans in destructive ways. What happened next? Well, the very next verse, that woman talks smooth, that seductress talks smooth to him. All at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose. Now, I know no one in here wants to think of themselves as an ox or a deer, getting ready to be killed. But it begs the question, who am I listening to when I make my plans? What is the foundational thing that I'm trying to accomplish when I am making plans for my life? Who's influencing my priorities? Who's influencing my schedule? Who's influencing my budget and my spending habits? See, it doesn't mean you shouldn't include people in your planning. It means you need to evaluate the influence others are having on your plans. Solomon actually encouraged us to get the counsel of others. So I don't want you to think for a minute that we're not supposed to have others help. He even says it in Proverbs 15:22. Plans go wrong for lack of advice, but many advisors will bring success. And Proverbs 20:18. Plans succeed through good counsel. Don't go to war without wise advice. You see, we talked about this last week in our relationship discussion. We need to make sure we have within our inner circle, in our closest relationships, people who value what we value, who are pursuing what we're pursuing, who foundationally have the same goals that we have. And we need to be able to then trust their counsel in our life, particularly those who have expertise in the areas that we're asking advice for. You need those people in your life. Maybe you're not going to war anytime soon. I hope not. But the point is, make important decisions with help. Now, let me see if I can illustrate it this way. We hear this all the time in our culture that you can do anything you can dream. Follow your dreams. Whatever your dreams are, go do those things. Well, I just want to ask you a question. Will you do this for me? If I ever stand up here and say, I'm going to now leave the ministry and go into a professional singing career, will you please stop me? Please, I beg you to stop me. Because, Steve, you have to understand that in order to have a professional singing career, you have to actually be able to sing well. Have you ever watched those competition shows on TV? And don't you wish someone would have told them? So they didn't do that on national television? Just because I like to yodel in the shower doesn't mean that I should go on The Voice. It just shouldn't be that way. I need people in my life to advise me, counsel me, help me make those kind of plans that will impact my whole life. That's really what Solomon is telling us to do. Make sure you have wise advisors. A wise person has wise people advising them. And that's what you need for your life. Here's the point. In our planning, if we're wise, we want, we long for, we look for, we chase after wise counsel. And the best place to find it, frankly, is right here in Proverbs. You could read one of these Proverbs a day and it would make you immensely wiser than you are now. But in the end, even with others' plans for us, they still become our plans. We still carry the responsibility, the culpability, the opportunity to develop our own plans. And Solomon says, get wise people around you. But he doesn't stop there. And here's where he's really trying to get us to go. Proverbs 19:21, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. In other words, I have my plans for my life. I have others' plans for my life, but I ultimately have God's plan for my life. And you may develop your own plans, and others may have plans for you, but ultimately, who has the best plan for your life but the one who designed you, the one who's called you to himself, the one who loves you like no one else could love you, the one who gave up his life so that you don't have to live in the consequence of your rebellion. He did all of that for you. Why trust anyone else's plan? Why trust anyone else's plan for your life? Remember, the main purpose of Proverbs is to train us up in wisdom, or simply how to live a wise life. And Solomon reminds us over and over that the passionate pursuit of the knowledge of God is what's going to bring you the most happiness, the most fulfillment, the most peace, the most wisdom in your life. See, let me go back to the scripture that we opened with today. Proverbs 16:3. Here's what he said. Commit your actions to the Lord, and your plans will succeed. Do you see the promise there? It's simple. Commit your plans to the Lord, and your what? Plans will succeed. Yeah. When I think of my plans, I have to ask myself then a question. Here's another question. Have I committed those plans to the Lord's direction? I think it's pretty cool that the God of the universe, who created 500 billion plus galaxies, who knows all the stars in all of creation by name, that God is even remotely interested in my life. And yet the fact is that the Bible tells us he has a plan for you. And a simple question I ask myself is the direction or foundation of my plans this one thing, the glory of God? Are the plans I make in my life to honor the God of the universe? God has plans for you, and he has plans for the world at large. Now, I want to make sure we talk about that for a second, because some people believe that nothing ever happens outside of the will of God. In other words, if it happened, God must have wanted it to happen. And I don't read the Bible like that at all. I mean, that's not biblical at all. God never wanted or intended for any of us to rebel against him. That was never his design, never his will. And James even writes it this way: when tempted, no one should ever say, God is tempting me. That's not his design. Temptation or sin was not what he intended for us. So your plans, or the plans others have for you, can definitely happen outside of the will of God, outside of the plan of God. And yet here's the confusing thing for some people. At the same time, Paul said this, and we know that all things work for good to those who love him. In other words, everything that happens is going to be good for the glory of God. And we say, wait a minute, how do those two things go together? How do I have this free will where I can do something outside of God's plan and will? And over here it says, but wait, everything that happens is worked out for good for God's glory. How do both of those happen? Can both of those happen? Yes. Vote for me. Everybody's right. Yeah, that's the whole point. God gives us the freedom to pursue our plans under our own desires, and yet nothing has to happen to impact his plan for the world as a whole. In other words, he knew what you were going to decide before you decided it, and he also knew what he was going to decide in response to what you decided. In other words, my free will in no way, shape, or form threatens the sovereignty of God. I don't know how he does that, but he's God and I'm not. And that's the beauty of it. He gives me this opportunity with my plans to choose to glorify and honor him in my life. The bottom line is that are you passionately pursuing the plan God has created for you? That is where you'll find your greatest happiness, your greatest fulfillment. Even if struggle comes, we are strong and courageous because we're following his plan. Now look, here's the interesting thing about this. Here's Solomon, this king who was given all this wisdom, all of it true, all of it right, and just because he knew the right thing to do doesn't mean he had to do it. And he actually chose to rebel against God. He actually chose to allow his nation to worship other gods. And ultimately, God kept his promise to Solomon. He said, you know what? You're always going to be king of the nation because I promised that to your father David. But my rule for you is to honor my name, and then you will always have an heir on the throne. Guess what? Right after Solomon, who disobeyed God, and the nation was divided and ultimately taken into captivity. All of these consequences because Solomon didn't live by his own wisdom. Solomon's plans weren't driven by his passionate pursuit of the knowledge and glory of God. See, men and women, this is what I really want you to grasp today. God has a plan for your life. God has a plan for the life of the church and the life of the world. Now, I get it. You know, a lot of people grow up and their parents influence their thinking about what they want to do. I mean, my mom always wanted me to be the president. I think she just said that to the rest of my family so they wouldn't beat me up. But she always had this idea of what she wanted for me, and yet she didn't press me. She didn't push me. She allowed me to find my own calling, my own skill set, and pursue God myself. She didn't force me into anything. And I want to say that to parents, you know, to awaken you to the reality that God not only has a plan for you, he has a plan for your children. And you should be wanting them to do nothing more but discover that plan for their life. Sometimes his plan for your life is challenging. Sometimes his plan for your life is interrupted or adversely affected by your rebellion or the rebellion of the world around you. But ultimately, His promise is this: if you will commit your plans to the Lord, you will succeed. Now, here's the thing. What does succeed mean? What's the definition of success when it comes to following the plan of God? Well, here it is. If your plan in your life is built upon this desire to glorify God, you will succeed. No matter how much the plan turns out exactly like you envisioned it or not, ultimately you committing that plan to the Lord and chasing after it because He led you to it will bring Him glory. And that's the success you're looking for. When your life's all done, it's not going to be whether or not you checked off a bunch of things that you had on your to-do list. Ultimately, when your life is all done, there's one simple question that you hope is answered in the positive. Did my life bring glory to God? More than anything, that is your success. Now, just to kind of wrap up, I want to remind you of something that a prophet was told by God, Jeremiah the prophet, where God said to him, if you seek me, you will find me if you seek me with all your heart. See, that's the promise, is that God does not hide His will from those who diligently seek after it. He will reveal His plan for you to you if you commit your life to Him. You can have plans. You should have plans, Solomon says. And others can help or hurt those plans. Be wise in who you choose influencing you. But ultimately, passionately pursue the plans God has for you, and His promise to you is that your life will be successful. This, men and women, is what it means to be wise. And so today, as we always do when we walk through God's Word together, we then ask ourselves, okay, what am I going to do with this? Now what? Or so what? What do I do with this? Well, simply it's committing yourself in this moment right now and saying in your own heart to the Lord, Lord, show me your plans for my life. And help me, Lord, to make your plans my plans. Men and women, that is wisdom.